better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll those dice.
Howdy, Rob.
Howdy, Matt.
Welcome to Dungeon Master of None. Today, we're going to ask all of our listeners to crack their copies of The Black Company, to pull out their Robert's Rules of Order, and get ready for some scheming and backstabbing, because with us on the show, we've got Mason Allen, sole designer of the Ivory Tower role-playing game. Hi, Mason.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? Pleasure to be here. Thrilled to be here with Rob and Matt.
Thanks for coming on. We're very excited to talk with you. We met Mason through mutual friends at Gen Con, where we were introduced directly to this game, which is a very cool game, and we are very excited to talk about for reasons that are going to become almost immediately clear, listeners, if you have been paying attention. But yeah. Why don't you tell us about it and give us the sort of elevator pitch, and then we'll really drill down on what's going on here.
Okay, great. So the sort of marketing tagline for Ivory Tower is "Your world has ended, but you'll still rule it." The general vibe, the gist, is that you and your players control extremely powerful archmages that rule a flying city in a world where the apocalypse just started. Because of this, you have abilities and skills on a scale that most other games only dream of, but those come with responsibilities. Namely, responsibilities represented by the summit, which is this political council that you are responsible to participate in. And so that's sort of the vibe of the game, is you get all of the power that comes with power, but also all of the responsibility. As each of you strive to sort of one-up each other on your way to more powerful, eventually, hopefully, superseding everyone.
The thing that immediately hooked me about this game is oh my God, I cannot wait to create the most beautiful, decrepit, evil, conniving, powerful archmage that, I've always, used as a villain in one of my other TTRPGs.
At long last, you get the opportunity to be the immortal, creaking, scheming, evil guy that your players are constantly railing against, except you're in a group of a bunch of other ancient, decrepit, scheming, evil guys, and you have to work together? ? It's a great premise.
I had a bunch of ideas, but the one that is now at the top of my notes page is just Elminster, but even more of a dick. Just Elminster being as he should be.
Yeah,
exactly. I was just gonna say one of the play testers, I feel really stated it well. The vibe of this game is be the worst you want to see in the world. Right? It's time to make villainy look good again, make morally gray as deliciously reprehensible but lip smackingly dramatic at the same time. So, yeah.
We'll talk about this when we get to the archetypes, which are really cool. But you have a couple, they're all good. A couple that I was immediately oh, I know exactly how I would make the worst fucking dude. I can immediately picture just the absolute worst person with this set of this portfolio of abilities, this background. Yeah, you really gave me a lot to work with. I think it's great.
I can't imagine what's going on in the real world as you're writing this game that could ever inspire you to write a game about the apocalypse just getting started and the rich and powerful scheming amongst themselves and fighting. But what were some of the other inspirations you had in mind for this game?
Yeah. To your point, I started work on this a little more than a year ago, right? So a few things have happened during the course of that time. that felt fairly instructive or inspirational for a game about people like this. In addition to that, though, there are a decent number of other inspirations, including sort of black comedies like Death of Stalin and Succession.
Yes.
These other, I think, pretty great properties that are about pretty fundamentally bad people in positions of power that they probably don't really deserve to be in, and the world around them is certainly worse for them being in them. In addition to that, also definitely pulling some inspiration from Babylon 5, Battlestar Galactica, sort of, I call them like space station dramas, right? Where you sort of have this fantastical sort of compression of people in a contained area that are sort of forced to deal with each other sociologically and politically, usually in very strenuous situations. That also was really close to home with the sort of apocalyptic bottle episode that is so much of the City of the Ivory Tower.
That's great. You're right that there's shows like Succession, for example. Like, we have a lot of media that shows in excruciating detail the rich, the powerful, especially the undeservingly so, and they're how petty and disagreeable they can be, and how how delightful sometimes that is to watch, but also how like frustrating and infuriating. We'll talk about some of the mechanics that I think encourage this type of play, but I can totally see how everyone's motivation to like gather power to themselves will produce, or could produce, exactly the kind of petty, obnoxious scheming and backstabbing, and ultimately failure to cooperate even on like minor things. I do think like that's Matt and I have not had a chance to play test it, but like based on reading it, I can just knowing the players I have in mind, I'm like, I'm not sure you guys are gonna make it through this. I'm not sure that winning is on the table for any of you, but I would love to see it in action.
Yeah, I feel like the mechanics. So, okay, again, we're all archmages. We're all ruling the last or one of the last bastions of existence as the world is ending, and we're all scheming for control. Like, one of the mechanics is just like the basic structure of how the campaign ends is you've created like a, I don't know, like, for the lack of a better term, game theory problem. Like, hey, if one player like dies, they drag everyone down with them. If they get their major fallout or something like that, it's over. So you got to keep everyone afloat. Otherwise, your Council of Archmages is going down. However, no one can. Only one player can win. So,
well, I think this is really clever. And I was thinking about this when I was reading, because when you described it to me, Mason, I was like, well, what's to stop one player from snowballing, right? Like, what's your like anti, running away with it problem? And the thing is, if you get too
the meta
good,
balances itself, Rob.
right? The game balances itself. If you get too good, the other players like are in a danger of like actually like losing, then you're fucked. Like, you don't want to run away with it. You want to like sort of like keep them going enough. I think this is very clever. Let's talk a little bit about like some specifics before we jump into it. This is loosely based on Sparked by Resistance by Rowan Rook-and-Deckard, which is a really neat system. It's very simple, D10 based. You have resistances that can be changed to fit the setting. It's a generic system, sort of, and yeah, you basically roll against them. You acquire stress. Bad things happen if you get too much stress. Fallout, which is just consequences. But you've tweaked it a little bit for Ivory Tower. Do you want to tell us about the the basics of the rule system. It's very simple, but it's a little different. You have a nice chart. I love your chart. Everyone who's listening, charts are good. Designers, put more charts in. I like charts. We're gonna show everybody the chart, but I really like it.
I'm pretty happy with with any charts in this game, and I do agree with you. More charts should be in game. Visual representations of things are helpful for people, right? But that all said, to the point of what we were talking about, Rob, the Sparked by the Resistance system is the core mechanical system of two of my favorite tabletop role-playing games of all time, Spire and Heart, both of which are made by Rowan Rook and Deckard. There is also the Resistance Toolbox for listeners unfamiliar with this mechanical system. The Resistance Toolbox is available entirely for free on Rowan Rook and Deckard's website and is sort of a PDF that walks you through the process of how to make your own Sparked by the Resistance game, explaining what the core mechanics and systems of it are so that you can do so.
It's like an SRD, but it also includes the instructions to build said SRD.
Totally.
It's so much better, yeah.
It's a really great toolbox. It literally is a toolbox. It's super cool.
I have found it extremely helpful. I will say it was put together pre-Heart, and I do think that there are some lessons that Rowan Rook and Deckard learned about, like, sort of what this system is capable of and good at, that they learned during the creation of Heart that don't entirely make it into the Resistance Toolbox. So if you're just approaching the game from the toolbox, if you're just approaching the system from the toolbox, there's some maybe innovations and lessons that you'll miss. But nevertheless, it's a great sort of like starting place, both because it's short, it's free, it's full of excellent advice. And at the core of the system, it is a dice pool rolling game, a D10 dice pool rolling game, as Rob mentioned. Depending on which game you're playing, how many D10s you can potentially roll and how you get them might fluctuate. But the sort of common things are that you automatically, by trying to do something, roll a D10. And then if you have a pertinent skill, which are sort of things that your character can be good at, then you get an additional D10. And if you have the pertinent domain, you get an additional D10 on top of that. Domains being sort of like areas of society, right? So in the case of Ivory Tower, Assault is a skill that represents sort of your ability to like strategize, command armies, or your underlings' ability to do so as well, right? Because in Ivory Tower, you are this sort of political leader. You're not just an individual. But if you are, for example, fighting a legion of devils, you will use the otherworldly domain, versus if you're trying to suppress a bunch of unruly gangs, you'll use the streets domain to represent that, like, those two different groups, different strategies will serve you better and worse, right? It's not the same thing. There are ways to get additional D10s on top of those three, but that's sort of the core role framework for most Sparked by the Resistance games. But the thing that's really beautiful about these games, in my opinion, is the Fallout system, which is at the center of sort of taking stress, or we would usually say in most tabletop role-playing games, taking damage, right? In most games, you just take damage, and it's purely physical, and there's no real mechanical consequence until you hit like 0 or something to that effect. Sometimes there will be consequences in addition to that, but a lot of the time I've found them to be fairly clunky. Fallout, I feel like, is a much more intuitive thing, where instead of just having hit points, you have these different resistances that, depending on the game, might represent different things. In the case of Ivory Tower, you have authority, you have defenses, you have esoterica, you have structure, and you have supply. And so when you take stress to structure, that represents the flying city that you're on starting to break, right? Like neighborhoods start to fall off as you take fallout, which turns the numbers of damage into sort of like these narrative beats. But that'll look different than if you take defenses fallout, which is about like your armies being defeated, or fortresses being lost, things like that. That's probably a little bit more of an answer and a little bit more of a fire hose, dear listener. I hope that all made sense. But I really love
it
this
does.
game.
And I love this. I think this is great. It mirrors something that it happens in one of my, in Mothership, which is one of my favorite systems. You acquire stress. The stress by itself doesn't do anything, but the more stress you have whenever you have a panic roll, the higher the chances are of something really bad happening to you. And stress works similarly in Ivory Tower and Sparked by the Resistance. You gain stress to your resistances, to your stats, basically, and then you will have to roll against that, or the chair will roll against that. And if you get under your stress, then, or equal to or less than your stress, then something happens. Fallout happens, major fallout if you've got too much stress. I love this idea. This has appeared in a few games, but I like it because it doesn't automatically mean that something bad happens, but it builds tension. I love this because, you could get lucky, right? You could just stack up stress and roll well and nothing bad would happen. But statistically, each little bit of stress that you take increases your chances of getting some fallout, which then snowballs and even more bad things happen. I really like how this works. I really like this system of modeling damage more so than just, you reach 0 and something bad happens, because I think that it forces players to make decisions, which is always fun, and pay attention. And it just it keeps everybody on their toes, right? You're looking at your stress, you're looking at your stats, you're like, what can I get away with? How much do I want to gamble? I really like it. I think it's very engaging. I really like this type of system.
It turns the whole game into a sort of push your luck thing, right? Where you're perpetually running the numbers on can I marshal my forces? Can I make some big gambit right now? If I do, what are the odds that leads to some kind of catastrophic setback, right? It's really fun. I like it a lot.
I think we got to talk about.
You mentioned the chair, Rob.
Yeah, the chair.
Which
we got
means
to talk about the structure, because this is
we
all
gotta
very
talk about
cool.
phases, right? This is amazing. This is blew me away when I read through the rules on this part. Yeah, I can't hold it in any longer. So the first part of the game, right? Every session when you sit down with your friends, is you're pursuing your grandiose ambitions. You're gaining resources to ascend and conquer reality. You're dealing with the threats to the Ivory Tower, to your city, maybe together in loose alliances or by yourself. You're very powerful. And then probably during the last hour of gameplay for the night, you have to sit down and have a committee meeting. You have to discuss things and pass laws. It's like the agenda phase in Twilight Imperium. It's like some of my favorite mechanics from some of my favorite board games, and it makes the scheming and stuff all the more fun. There are 2 phases: city phase and then council phase.
Yeah, 100%. This really, the council, the summit, this is sort of the unique offering of Ivory Tower, particularly compared to other sort of resistance games and things like that, is that you have this recurring thing where the more that you roll during a city phase, the harder things are going to get. You start to spread yourself and those who work for you thin. And so eventually there comes a point where all the players have done their various things that they can and reach a point where they're like, all right, we've got to go to summit. Because that's when you do this hour-long council, and after the council is over, all difficulties reset and you can go back to scheming, right? But during the course of this hour, which the rulebook explicitly says it cannot be a second longer. The game master, called the chair in this game, has an hour-long timer, and the moment that it hits that last second, the summit is over. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a vote or if you're in the middle of a debate. If you have scheduled things so that something is halfway done when the summit ends, it doesn't get finished. And during the course of that, you sort of do a little bit of a streamlined Model United Nations type deal. You do a political simulation wherein player characters can vote, can debate each other, can convene, sort of go to recess and try to sort of wheel and deal with each other. And these different decisions, these different things that you do, then have mechanical repercussions on your following city phases, right? It's not just roleplay, though certainly it is a lot of roleplay. It also is roleplay that gives lasting mechanical consequences in the aftermath, right? Yeah, this is the portion of the game that makes the game what it is, and it's also the portion of the game that is going to make people make deals more than they ever have in other tabletop role-playing games, or at least that's the goal, right? The goal is to get people to come to the table with plots and with plans, in large part because of the summit.
Well, this is, I mean, there's a million things I think Matt and I both have to say about this, but this is great because you've done something really interesting here, because this is a little bit like both a TTRPG and a board game, right? Like you've got a little bit of both, which I think is really cool. You've also got a PvP element. This is player versus player, which is again not very common in tabletop role-playing games. You know, there's a funny tweet that's like, emails are turn-based combat, but you know what else is turn-based combat is a city council
Bylaws.
meeting or a committee meeting. That is also turn-based combat. You have to wait for your turn to talk, and then you have to try to like win the conversation. And the hour-long thing, listeners, if you've ever been to a city council meeting, or if you've ever been on a committee meeting that went too long, you know that the worst part of it is that the person who wins is usually the person who has nothing else to do, is the person who can talk the longest and has the most enthusiasm for just blathering. So making it precisely an hour, this is very, very smart. This is one of those things that I think is truly innovative. I think you've done something like really like unique here. I'll admit, like, I got to see how this plays out in real life. But I think that people will pick up on it, and I think that it's a great idea. I think it's so funny. And also fun, but also like hilarious.
Have either of you played, and this is chasing that same thing, a mega game before? Like a game that's played at conventions with like 40 people.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah. I didn't play it, but there were a couple of those happening at Gen Con. Yeah, I'm familiar with the concept.
Yeah. I played in one. I've been chasing that high like the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was one where there's like aliens dealing with like doing something to planet Earth, and there were various factions, right, representing countries or agencies, and there were times in the game where you had to come together and discuss stuff in character if you wanted to, and then go back and do your own thing. I was like, man, I wish I could capture this feeling with just like a group of friends that I could organize, because I can't organize a game for 40 people. I'm not going to do that. And I think this does that. So I don't know. This is so cool.
That was a big goal with this, was to sort of capture that faction role play that sometimes happens in these big scale moments, but sometimes escapes sort of smaller games, right? I do, from the time that I started working on Ivory Tower, there was this part of me that like dreamed of a day when there would be like a 16 archmage summit, right? Like reach a point where there could be these sort of like big games of Ivory Tower where like the summits get unwieldy, and suddenly the time management that was always a struggle becomes even worse. But even just at your table, at least in my experience, there are some tables I think, and I try to be pretty clear about this in the rules of Ivory Tower, I don't think this is a tabletop role-playing game for everybody. Not everyone wants to like do sort of political backstabbing with their friends, right? And there's also plenty of people that don't want to role play sort of mustache twirling villains. And if that's the case for you, that's great. But there were also some tables where at the beginning, coming into this from like 5e or similar tabletop role-playing games, a lot of players were here to save the world. And then toward the end of the campaign, one of the players was about to win and stuff everyone else in the process. And 3 players realized that, and it just immediately turned, right? Like, the backroom deals that started happening as all of them were like, okay, what is our play to stop this guy? What are votes that we can put into effect to, like, slow his roll as much as possible, right? On top of what Rob said earlier about the game, like, you can't just ruin everybody in this game. You've got to keep them just alive enough. In addition to that, the other balance mechanic to keep people from running away with it, because each player character levels up individually, the other thing to help people run away with it is the voting, right? Because if you can vote people into oblivion and stick them with a bunch of different tasks that they have to tackle, that makes it so that they waste all of their rolls. They waste all the easy stuff on things they don't want to do, and then are trapped, unable to do the things that they care about the most. Yeah, it has been a ton of fun, and I'm really excited to hear about the experiences people will have in the future with it as well.
Well, Matt described a high that he's been chasing his entire life, and one that's similar for me that you can get in a lot of like social games, right? There's a lot of games like, I don't know, like Werewolf or whatever, like or games that are a similar thing where everybody's got like some secret information, and you have to either deceive or collaborate with the other players to win. And if anybody is too like obviously winning, they can't win. And one of the most thrilling things in any game is being the person who manages to sort of like thread that needle and come out of nowhere and win the game. And it seems like Ivory Tower is like built for that, because if you are too obviously out in front, the obvious thing to do for the other wizards is to, take you down to size. So, if you are a, 5-dimensional chess psycho, like a lot of us are, who love to like think, several moves ahead and consider themselves very clever in the ways of, social manipulation, this is a perfect game for trying to like, outthink your friends, trying to like play, oh, I'm just a little guy, just a little birthday boy. Don't worry about me. It's I feel like it would be very hard to win, which is one of the cool things about it. Like if you really do have to hide your power level in this game, but like I think the mechanics and the sort of like social aspect work really well together. I can already see how it sort of like has a flywheel effect of like propelling the game forward. Everybody's trying to like gain advantage, get to the summit, strike those deals, and then do their city phase. And then as soon as the city phase becomes difficult, get back to the summit. And you've got to be thinking ahead, right? You mentioned this in the rules, which I think is good. It's good to make people aware of it. Yes. If you're thinking about the summit as the summit happens, you're too late, right? You need to be thinking about like what deals you want to make, what changes that you want to implement to the next city phase, like halfway through your first city phase, or else you're going to be behind. You're not going to be ready to like make the most of that summit. I do feel like this is going to be like a lot for some people, but for us board game psychos, like this is absolutely like the kind of thing that is a lot of fun. Like I think a really like interesting, compelling experience, and combined with like some really cool role play, being a real vaudevillian, evil guy who wants to rule the world in his own particular fashion.
Speaking of being a villain and the like flywheel of this game, Mason, listeners, you can't see this, but Mason has all like 3 expansions of the board game Root on a shelf behind him. And one of the other things this game does is you pick a playbook, an archetype, right? And each type of like archmage has their own particular strengths and will, they win more or less in the same ways, but like through their own channels. It's that very much asymmetrical warfare of a board game like Root. I don't know if that's unrelated. It's just happenstance that Root has to be behind you, but I was thinking of Root when I was reading through parts of this.
I did not put that there on purpose. That just happened to be on the shelf. But it's fitting that it's there because Root's asymmetry was 100% an informing influence on the game. That was a big thing that I had in my brain coming into this was I feel like Root does a pretty good job in a board game of sort of simulating the different facets of the levers of power, right? That like military might is not always the end all be all of political control. The will of the people might be, or there's like financial avenues that you can take, so on and so forth, right? And so in this game that's about different sort of political leaders of this city, I wanted these archmages, they're all very powerful magically, but I wanted them all to sort of represent different facets of this society, of the tower, like as a civilization. And so because of that, right, like one of the archmages, the commander, lives really close to the sort of like center of military power, as far as the sort of social and political structures of this sort of setting are concerned. And so as a result of that, there are certain approaches that they're incentivized to take mechanically that don't make as much sense for other player characters, like the treasurer, for example, whose whole thing is just they are so rich that they can basically buy out the cosmos, and that's kind of how they work their magic, is sort of by wheeling and dealing with bribes. Very different vibes, and also taking very different directions to attain power, but both very directly competing with each other for power, right? Because if the treasurer gets a leg up, that means that there is less sort of like political cachet for the commander to seize. So yeah, not intentionally on the shelf, but thrilled that we got to talk about it because Root is a really big inspiration for this game.
Root was what I was thinking of too, and when I was thinking about the last time that I achieved a major board game success, it was a come from nowhere win in Root because the other players didn't realize what I was up to, and that was so satisfying. But what's so cool about Root, and the reason why that can work, is because it's asymmetrical, and the reason why more games aren't asymmetrical because it's hard to balance that, right? Like that's difficult. But it was when I got to the commander where I was like, oh, I see what's going on here, because every archmage has their own thing, but like the commander, I guess like they're much like the Ivory in Root. It has his own like sub game which he is playing, where he is trying to manage his undead legions, which are jealous of each other, seeking glory, and so the commander is potentially very powerful, but he's got to manage his own like unruly troops. And then you've got an astrologer who can, do some wacky stuff with rolls and with time, and you said the treasurer who's just rich, right? And there's a ton of compelling things about like all of these, but they all clearly like play differently. My favorite, I think, again, when I was thinking of like I would make the absolute worst guy, is the legend,
Yes.
The ascended hero. I'm like, oh man, I can already imagine the just douchebag who archmage that I would make out of this, who has some like really cool mechanics, which are just, some of them are just like, yeah, I win this role, or like, I'm a hero, so I get to do what I want. It's good stuff, Mason, and I don't envy your challenge in like balancing it. Nothing struck out to me as like inherently broken, but I feel like in playtesting you're going to find some things because it's hard to do. But the asymmetrical thing I think is just like so fun in board games, and so it keeps everybody engaged. It also like makes the game like infinitely more complex and more replayable. And yeah, there's so much cool stuff going on here. You also have great art. Really, really cool art for each of the archmages, the archetypes. That really, really evocative, neat stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah, the other classes we didn't mention are the botanist, sort of a mad scientist type wizard, the locksmith, like a planar opener and deal maker, the voice, the person who's got a lot of influence on the city itself. Because it's like the Ivory Tower is structured like a fantastic, ultra fantastic, to use the words from the book, ultra fantastic, like Italian late medieval merchant republic. So you've got like, you're the ruling council, the chair is the doge, but they don't have any real power. And then there's like below you a choir of 72 other mages that are also snapping at your heels, and then the mob of people below them. It's so great. So many cool factions.
I mean, in a way, this is a PvPvE game, right? Like, because you're also competing against, there's pawns and there's factions and there's the 72, and there are mechanics for gaining their favor or using them to your advantage or suppressing them or whatever. Which, a lot of this is social, right? A lot of this is like you are going to be like negotiating with your fellow archmages, but some of it is gaining mechanical advantage through the city phase, through actual like mechanical abilities. I think, again, to me, this is really interesting. It's not for everybody, but like trying to like bear in mind like your mechanical ability, as well as trying to like remember to keep the other players either on your side or like not too much against you, is exactly the kind of all-encompassing, brain-scratching, hyper puzzle that I love to play in games. I think this is very, very interesting and compelling. It is a lot to keep track of. There's a lot going on in the Ivory Tower, but it's to me it's all like very, very interesting.
Yeah. There is a sizable bit going on here. And with that being the case, one of the big priorities in the game was to make sure that there were like tools in place and some solid like mechanical tools, but also advice for the chair when running the game of sort of how to manage all of this. The hope is that each Ivory Tower that you play in is sort of a bit of a clock, politically, mechanically. All of these different factions that are in the Ivory Tower have sort of a friend or an enemy. And so if your players want to, they can sort of lean on those relationships a little bit and really sort of pit the factions against each other or against other archmages. But also at the same time, if that's too weighty, I thus far, I have gotten to play Ivory Tower a handful of times myself, and every time that I've done so, I've felt, firstly, like the players really sort of find their feet toward the end of the campaign, but also secondly, like a lot of them sort of come away from the campaign with thoughts and excitement about what they would do differently the next time that they play, right? Like what levers of power did they feel like maybe they didn't pull as much this campaign that they would want to in a later campaign. In that way, I think the game is also kind of like Root, in the sense that when you're playing this board game for the first time, Root, because of its asymmetry, because the different factions are so unlike each other, it can be a little bit intimidating. You're sort of learning 4 different mini games in a way when you sit down to play it for the first time. But then when you play it the second and the third, it becomes more comfortable, and sort of some of the nuances that you didn't notice the first time sort of lay themselves bare. And then maybe you swap in different factions later on, swap in different sort of player characters later on, and different wrinkles sort of show themselves. And that was a big hope with Ivory Tower, was that this is something that people can come back to, even though it's sort of got this competitive element and things like that. You might think after one campaign there's not a whole lot to come back to, but the hope is that this is a game that will really look very different campaign to campaign.
Oh yeah. There's no way they're going to be the same.
Yeah.
I mean, you made a great point that I think listeners might not have picked up on from our description of the game so far. Like everything or most of the things in this game function as a clock. So, and you as the chair have like some control either at the beginning or if you want to insert in the middle of the campaign to kind of set the requirements for some of these clocks to say, hey, this is a short, medium, long campaign. Like the game, despite all of the balancing we've talked about, cannot go on forever. You will lose or one player will win very, very quick. I think quicker than most players expect. Just like Root. When you first start playing, you're like, oh, this will never end. We'll always, no. Someone's going to win.
Winning route is a little bit like bankruptcy, Matt. It happens slowly and all at once.
Yes.
Actually, speaking of winning, but also this mechanic is another one of those things that I really like because it forces players to make decisions and kind of gauge risk. But can you talk to us about Ivory and Obsidian? Because I really like these mechanics, and I think that they do a really good job of pushing players to force them to make difficult decisions basically all the time.
Yeah, totally. Ivory and Obsidian are sort of the two meta currencies at the center of the game.
We love a meta
really
currency.
Fancy word that can intimidate some people. I'm a huge fan of a meta currency. Ivory and Obsidian, to Rob's question, are two meta currencies that are at the center of the game. And in the end, they are the way by which players either lose or win. They are both in-game, but also sort of like in-setting resources. The rulebook states that Ivory sort of manifests naturally whenever moments of great magic occur. What does this mean from a mechanical perspective? It means that when player characters perform certain feats of tremendous magic in the game, they can gain Ivory. And these feats are typically exclusive to specific archetypes. The way that the commander sort of manufactures Ivory is different than the way the astrologer does, is different than the way the treasurer does, so on and so forth. And once you've gained Ivory, the rules state that there are a number of ways that you can use them, but the focal thing that you can use Ivory for is leveling up. So this makes it so that each player character levels up independent of each other, right? There's no milestone here, there's no experience, there is Ivory and there is Obsidian. And speaking of Obsidian, Obsidian is the counterpart to Ivory. Players can potentially gain Obsidian through the previously stated sort of archetype-specific abilities, but there is also both Ivory and Obsidian out there in the world. Other factions have this stuff. Obsidian manifests when like tremendously dark things sort of rear their heads, right? It's sort of the eldritch un-Ivory in a way. And in the middle of this apocalypse that is actively occurring during your Ivory Tower game, Obsidian is around. Players start out with it. In addition to leveling up, which both Obsidian and Ivory can help you do, Ivory can also be, you can burn an Ivory to automatically get a critical success on something. You can burn an Ivory to sort of do other things mechanically. And so there is sort of this decision of, there's always the option of using it for something else other than leveling up.
You can trade it for that favor that's going to help you win the game.
Yes.
Exactly. You can wheel and deal with it. And Obsidian, as its sort of dark alter ego, can be used for bad things as well. You can spend Obsidian to cause someone else to automatically critically fail in secret, right? So text your game master before a session and say, hey, the locksmith's getting too far ahead of us. I'm going to spend my Obsidian the first chance that I get to make them critically fail and give them fallout if I can. And so that sort of turns into a lever that you can pull to sort of slow someone else's roll. One last thing really quick regarding Obsidian specifically. I mentioned earlier that it can be used if you want to help you level up. But unlike Ivory, if you level up using Obsidian, you sort of corrupt the improvement that you gain. And then in the future, when you use it, there's a chance that that corruption spreads into other improvements. And so there's this sort of risk-reward thing that you have to do when you're deciding whether or not you're going to use Obsidian, where if too many improvements of yours become touched by Obsidian, you will eventually become this sort of eldritch being, this arbiter of the apocalypse, and the resulting conflicts between your now monstrous self and your fellow player characters will cause all of you to lose the game, right? As Rob stated earlier, there's a few ways that you can lose Ivory Tower, and all of them are extremely dramatic.
I really like how this works in practice. It's all the best things of a meta currency of your very best board games. You described what it does, but like we're talking about automatically critically succeed, cause an automatic critical failure, negate fallout. These are really powerful effects, but you need these things to win, right? Like, so you can't, you can't be spending them too much. You certainly can't be hoarding them. You could, obviously this is an incredibly valuable thing to trade for favors. I love how this works in practice. This is one of those things that I think that in other games like this drives people forward, right? Like, your ability, your level of risk with this type of thing sort of like dictates your ability to move the game forward or to sort of drag it to a halt, and everybody's gonna have a different approach to it. But I think this is really clever.
The last mechanic I want to mention is just like it fully embraces the like fantasy of being a wizard. You have all these skills and you have infinite resources. You have whole demon armies and magic item vaults and deals with extraplanar beings that you can call upon. But you can also just like fuck it. Let's just do magic to fix it at an incredibly high cost, right? Anytime you can just be like, okay, we're doing magic to fix this problem. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that magic to fix this problem. I love that. I also want to mention, I can't believe we haven't gotten to this. I think with this game has a lot going on, but we got to talk about the chair, the game master. Because it's a game that has a lot going on, you have to like embrace the role as the chair that, well, man, my whole job here is to just come up with a couple of other things that are happening to the city for the players to deal with. And the rest is going to be them pursuing their own ends and fucking with each other and fucking around and making alliances and then abandoning those alliances. Let me come up with some really cool, fantastic things. And the final half of this book is just, you can judge like a TTRPG, not just on its mechanics, but on its fluff. And if the like cool fluff doesn't immediately get me, then I'm like not interested. And by God, the corpse of the steel orc god fortress, the cradle of the ungod, the woad for witches. Like there are so many things in this. I was like, oh, this is amazing. So sorry, I brought up too many things, but the game mastering advice here is excellent, and the way it's structured makes your job actually pretty easy. And then the fluff is amazing.
Thrilled to hear all of that. I come from a tradition of tabletop role-playing games that I feel like often mistreats its game masters.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, doesn't treat them, right? Like, a lot of the time, I feel like game masters are the people kind of left out in the cold a little bit and forced to fend for themselves.
I was reading the Traveler core book, and the game master advice is like five pages out of a 300-page book. It's so great. It's so old school. I love it, but also that it sucks. That sucks. This is not the case here.
And yeah, 100%. The hope is that there is an abundance of like tools, advice, resources for the game master to use, organized in a streamlined enough way that you don't have to go pouring through tomes to find the specific thing you need at the time that you need it. And then also, like, to Matt's point, like with the players individually each pursuing their own victories, this isn't a game where you need to put a convincing enough quest in front of your players. The idea is that the game itself is the quest. The pursuit of power for these characters is its own reward, right? And so the players are sort of unendingly, in an ideal game, maintaining that momentum in a way that doesn't require the game master, the chair, to do so. And so then it's just left to the chair to just introduce the wrinkles, right? The world around the players has its own agenda. And the whole point of the chair is just to intermittently remind them of that in ways that will not bring the game entirely to a halt, but will absolutely disrupt, derail, and reposition the plans of our player character.
I've got two things to say, and one is that I'm sorry that we're Sorry that we're not going to have more time to spend on all of the fluff, all the delightful lore that's in here, because there's a lot of it. And like Matt said, a lot of it is it's gonzo. One of the words you use at the beginning, like, what is this game? It's ultra fantastic, and it is. Everything you're thinking about fantasy, listeners, crank it up to 11, which is the stuff I love. That aside, the thing about the chair, and you're right, I think a lot of games. Listen, Matt and I we're game masters who have a podcast for game masters. Nobody knows better than us that books often mistreat them, and I appreciate that this one doesn't. But like, what I think would be really cool about being the chair, and why I want to sort of like run this as the chair, is my favorite thing in the world to do as a GM is like set a dilemma in front of my players and just watch what happens. Like a real light touch. Like I do like to be involved. I like to do things, but if I can set up the dominoes in such a way that like they are busy arguing with each other for 30 minutes, I think that's so much fun. And that's kind of a lot of what the chair is. Like I wonder if like maybe some people might like look at this and think it's boring because you're not like controlling the world. But like to me, this seems like so much fun. You have such an opportunity to just sort of lightly, poke and just like watch the chaos extend from like all of your like little decisions. Like I was reading this and I was just thinking about all the amazing ways this would be fun to play and to watch, like how the summits go down and how the archmages like, respond to these intrusions. I think it's also just like, this is one of those things that is different, which is what's really cool about Ivory Tower. Like this is a unique way to be a GM that I think would be cool, right? I think different is fun, and this would be like a really cool thing to try, I think.
That's the hope. That's the hope. And the hope is also everybody loves NPCs. And to your we've used the word ultra fantastic a few times during this recording, and I'm thrilled because it is really one of the fundamental elements of this game, is just to go for broke on the crazy fantasy of it all. But the hope is that even though maybe you're not like, maybe your average game master is not quite as much at the center of things in Ivory Tower as they are in other games, you're still playing every NPC in this world. And in Ivory Tower, that means you might role play as the shattered remains of a god on the brink of death, or a half devil, half human rat criminal who lives in the basement of the tower, or an elemental made out of everyone's trash, or a mermaid queen who hates all the people that are in like trespassing on the small bubble of ocean that she has managed to preserve, right? The hope is that there's just such a range of NPCs to play in this game that are ready-made for you if you want them, but also, if nothing else, are just inspiration, and there are tools in here to make your own as well. Yeah. And expand beyond.
You should, if this game sounds at all appealing to you, you should get it to play this game. If you want, was it like 50 pages of ultra fantastic NPCs and factions? If me saying Shimizi, the bravest and smallest of moons, doesn't like stir something in you, I don't know, you're lost to me. There's so many cool factions and things you can deploy in this game as the chair.
Matt, we're running up on time.
Yes.
I have like one big question that I want to ask Mason, but I want it's sort of just like a general reflections things. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we start driving towards a conclusion?
This game was like, I was thinking about like the deep history of role-playing games earlier this month, about like what we now call like Bronsteins and stuff like that, these wargaming referees who would set up this world where you could do anything and people would backstab each other and form alliances and accomplish their own goals. I'm like, that sounds really cool to run. That sounds impossible for me to run in both like logistics in the terms of the number of people and like planning it out and like playing a game that meets everyone's expectations. But it's like this. You built a game system that gives me all of the tools as the game master to run that kind of game, and that's really cool to me.
So the thing that I'm really wondering, the question I have for you, Mason, because you've had a chance to well, you wrote it, but also you had a chance to play test it a bunch, which I think is like, to me, the most interesting part of the game, which is saying a lot because there's a lot of interesting parts of it, but is the voting part of the summit section, right? Because it's pretty open-ended, right? Like whatever you put on the floor, if you can get the votes, you make it happen. And like there's some like, I think some obvious things that you can do, like you have to spend, like if you vote that everybody has to spend their first city phase, I don't know, attacking X faction or building
Defense.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's simple enough. But like you could also do some like really off the wall stuff. What sort of like interesting things have you seen happen in like a summit session? Like what are the really like wild votes that you have seen come up? Like anything that stands out? I know this is kind of a put you on the spot question, but like I'm imagining the things that might emerge from this type of conversation, and my imagination is running wild.
No, you're good. You're good. This is a great question, and I think it goes back a little bit to what I said earlier about like people coming away from it thinking to themselves, "Oh, I think I'm gonna do this thing a little bit differently next time I play Ivory Tower," and specifically votes, I think are a big takeaway for people. Where in a number of the games that I've run, people have sort of come away with the thought of, next time I'm going to take some big swings. Next time I'm going to do some wild stuff with the votes. As is in the games that I was able to run leading up to getting Ivory Tower out there, some of the craziest things, honestly, I would say some of the craziest moments boiled down to instances where the wording on a vote that happened...
That's the other thing I was wondering about.
Was just permissive enough for something to happen, right? I remember in the last playtest that happened, there was one player, our locksmith, toward the end of the campaign. Toward the end of the campaign, the locksmith and the commander were in a dead heat to win it. And everyone else, or at least the majority of the other players, were like just kind of reaching for whatever they could grab to slow these two down. And those two were perfectly tied, and each of them was just like one improvement away from winning the game. And so they were also like, they weren't trying to help everyone else too much, but they were trying to sort of nudge the other one just a little bit to lose some momentum. And there was a really clutch moment in our last session where the commander was on the precipice of a win, and a vote had gone through requiring that the commander do something during that city phase. I think the commander had to attack an enemy faction during the city phase, but the commander had managed to arrange things so that the wording was just ambiguous enough that the commander could use their sort of ivory ability before they had to do the assault. And the player who had sort of led the vote against the commander was making appeals, was being like, hold on, could the wording be interpreted this way, right? And there was this sort of like 5-minute pause in the game where like the commander and this player were both like, semantics, wait a second, technically couldn't it be interpreted in these two separate legal ways? And if it can be interpreted in these two separate legal ways, is there one of them that is the default? And just that sort of whole moment, it was absolutely delicious, sort of watching the reach of it was a treasurer, watching the reach of the treasurer, just trying to sort of hold them back a little bit longer, and the commander trying to make sure that his way was paved well enough that he could beat the locksmith to the finish line.
This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a committee meeting.
Exactly. Welcome to Ivory Tower.
I love it.
Yeah, the game, link in the show notes. It's $30 for a well-made game. Check it out. It's at if you're curious to follow you, Mason, and other gaming endeavors, right? riffkidgames.itch.io. And are you working on anything else cool that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, sure. I've got a few irons in the fire.
Sorry, this is the annoying question people ask. People, you just published a book. What about another book?
You can always
are you going?
You can always say no or nothing. I'm ready to talk about now, but we want to give you an opportunity.
I do appreciate that. I think I'll just say I have a little handful of games that I'm bouncing back and forth between and doing a little bit of play testing here and a little bit of designing there, or as times may be, a lot of play testing and a lot of designing. And I'm excited about a lot of them. Think that they'll also be respectably gonzo. But I think that's all I'll say about them for now on here.
I like that.
Well, check it out. Link in the show notes. Thanks for coming on the show. This was a blast talking with you about this.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Mason. Thanks for listening, everybody. And whatever you do, keep rolling them dice.